Gentlemen, it's the 19th round of core commander level talks that's going on between India and China, and this is at the Chushul-Moldo border. What is happening? What is the current state? This standoff that's been going on till about 3 years, that we are matching them strength to strength, and we are not buckling down, we are not backing down. So this territorial aggression is being met with equal might, and we are perhaps further reinstalling and increasing our presence in and around that entire line of actual control. But amidst this ongoing tussle, even as this meeting is going on, these discussions are taking place at, like I said, the Chushul-Moldo meeting point in eastern Ladakh. Even as they want to try and resolve this enduring military standoff, this is perhaps the Chinese strategy. They once get in, they stay there, and then they talk to you and wear you out, eventually making you think that that is perhaps the status quo. This time around, India is not blinking. But this development coincides with the week leading up to the BRICS Leaders Summit in South Africa. During this summit, Prime Minister Narendra Modi is set to engage in a face-to-face meeting with the Chinese President Xi Jinping. This is also in the run-up to the entire G20 Leaders Summit due sometime early next month. And we are expecting President Xi Jinping to come down. Will there be a de-escalation there, or will this continue to be a sore point? Will China then continue to push through their age-old tactic of saying, let's leave these talks aside and let it be business as usual? That's how they try and reset the status quo and say, let's continue to engage and let's do business as usual. Is it business as usual, or is there a far greater dynamic? The Chinese propaganda machinery, we will talk about that. We will also talk about how they will go to any extent to use comprehensive national power or anything within their wherewithal to extend the CCP and PLA's own vision, dynamic, and what they need to do to look at trying to bring to fruition the vision of Mao Zedong, which was set in 1949 of the China they envisaged 100 years later. They're all working on that path. If they could use COVID to try and enter Galwan and try and continue and try and capture those places, one can only understand that they'll go to any length. We'll talk about all that, but first up, big news coming in on why, perhaps for the CCP and President Xi Jinping, Prime Minister Narendra Modi is perhaps not the most favorite choice. Why is it that there is a constant thought process which believes that there are entities in the West and there are also entities in China who do not want to see Prime Minister Narendra Modi coming back to a third term? India under PM Modi is not something the CCP likes. Our Group Editor Security, Manoj Gupta, getting us these details, where ahead of this BRICS summit, this news coming in, why Modi is in China's favorite ahead of the BRICS summit. And let's try and understand this. Some of the things that we have done, not just post-Galwan, even before that. The BRO, the Galwan response, unprecedented for an Indian Prime Minister, the bloody nose that we gave the Chinese. Then the massive infrastructure build-up, starting with the Border Roads Organization, which is now trying to do in perhaps 4 or 5 years what's not been done in 50. So that's the next part, massive infrastructure build-up along the LAC. The last 9 years, no other government has sent this much. Now, as per the BRO ramping up roads in Arunachal districts along the LAC. Also, Modi's idea to set up Mountain Strike Corps in Bengal, that is also aimed at China. There is also posts along the LAC in Arunachal that have helped helipads and also transit stations. Rafale deal further bolsters the defense ties with France under the Prime Minister's leadership. India's skillfully navigating ties with Russia amidst the Moscow proximity to China. We've been managing that relationship for quite some time now. India's technological and investment bans against Beijing. And of course, banning Chinese flights as a firm measure during the COVID pandemic. Some very hard steps that India took while continuing to engage with the Chinese in trade, playing their game itself. That's a reality. We are still trading with the Chinese, but only in the essentials that we need. There are a lot of other things that we've really actually brought our engagement with the Chinese down. It wants a weak leader whose access is limited and not possible under the current Modi government. They want people who will succumb. They will not take hard measures and who will succumb to the Chinese psyops and the pressure that they mount on it. So these are some of the matter aspects that have come to the fore, and we thought we must speak about this because this Chinese aspect, how do you break this juggernaut and how do you turn around and tell China to take us as seriously as the world is taking us, and not to try and encroach upon our space, mind space, territorial space at all levels. Lieutenant General KJ Singh is with us, Professor Brahmachalani is with us, and we also have with us Professor Victor Gao. Namaste, ladies and namaste, gentlemen. Thank you very, very much. Thank you for joining us here on this broadcast. Jai Hind, General KJ Singh. Thank you very much. Brahmachalani ji, if you can hear me, sir.
I can hear you.
This aspect of we don't want Modi to have a third term. There are many entities who would think this way. Now, aside of the political narrative, is it perhaps India's posture that has changed over the last 5 or 6 years especially, that is irking a few nations who would like India to be subservient in its psychological makeup?
Well, first, India is responding to China's buildup of forces. China is engaged in a frenzied buildup of its forces along the Himalayan frontier with India, and India has had to respond. But there's also a larger issue here, that this crisis on the border was triggered by Xi Jinping's encroachments on key borderlands in Ladakh. So this is a military crisis of Xi Jinping's own making. He may want to resolve this crisis, but without losing face. How does he lose face? By reaching a deal with India. If he can avoid losing face, is the real issue for him. He tried to compel India to buckle. Those efforts have come a cropper. This means that any compromise settlement with India would require Xi Jinping to climb down to some extent. Will he be willing to climb down? That's the issue. The issue is not so much about Modi. The issue is about Xi Jinping, whether he's willing to climb down, because this is the crisis of his own making.
Professor Victor Gao?
I'm here. How are you?
Good, sir. Would you agree with Professor Brahmachalani, or would you have a different point of view? Why after 3 years there is no disengagement yet? And is the CCP not very happy with Prime Minister Narendra Modi?
No, the fact that Mr. Modi is the Prime Minister of India is completely a decision made by the people in India, and China has nothing to do with it. Whoever who becomes the Prime Minister, whoever who forms the Indian government, China will need to deal with him or her and the government as it is. Therefore, China respects the Modi government, respects Prime Minister Modi as the Prime Minister of India, and will need to deal with him as he is the Prime Minister of Modi. China doesn't dictate or influence who becomes the Prime Minister of India, and China and India really need to gather their acts together to solve the territorial disputes, which were not made by India or by China. I emphasize that the territorial disputes were made by the British Indian colonists, and neither China nor India should be held responsible for their mistakes. We need to put the territorial disputes behind us. Both India and China need to focus on economic development to eliminate poverty, build up connectivity of all kinds throughout each other's country. And I hope between China and India, that is mega trend for China. War or war itself are not the mega trend for the Indian people or the Chinese people.
Professor Victor Gao, sounds very good. Are you reading off a teleprompter? Because this sounded like a prepared speech. But China, is it really walking the talk? CCP, is it really walking the talk? Is it India that's encroached into Chinese territory, or is it China which over the last 6.5 to 7 decades has slowly, gradually encroached upon sovereign Indian territory?
Thank you. If I have a teleprompter, it is my conscience. So I'm speaking out of my conscience. Secondly, if we look at the border issue in the eastern section between China and India. China, throughout its successive governments, has never acknowledged or agreed to the McMahon line, which was drawn up by the British Indian government. Therefore, we need to really extricate ourselves from the boxes that the British Indian colonists built for both China and India. We really need to fully understand that the relations between the Chinese people and the Indian people for thousands of years have been very peaceful, very friendly with each other. And it was the British Indian colonists who created all these trouble. Neither India nor China should be held hostage by these colonial schemes. And we need to sit down and talk with each other and put the territorial disputes behind us. There are disputes in the middle section as well as in the Ladakh region.
So was it India
Peacefully rather than.
But Professor Victor Gao, was it the British colonists or the Chinese communists who came with the five-finger theory, who said that these are all lands which may be part of sovereign India, but we should claim these as ours because we need it for our strategic advantage? If you're talking about a border treaty, why is it for 7.5 decades that the Chinese Communist Party has not had the time to sit down properly and eke out a border plan, which India has once time and again suggested? Why has the Chinese Communist Party continued, and its PLA, continued to renege on the border agreements and protocols that were signed in the 90s and successively? Then, if you really want a border treaty as a benchmark which had no inking of the British colonists, then let's go back to the 1842 Treaty of Chushul. And that was signed between the erstwhile India Maharajas and also the Chinese at that time. So if you go back to the 1842 Treaty of Chushul, then you are sitting on a lot of occupied territory which you should vacate.
Listen, when you talk about the Chinese Communist Party, I hope you will first of all acknowledge the mightiness of the Communist Party of China, which is the largest political party in the world, which is the backbone of China's strength, which is really the inspiration for the Chinese people. No political party in the world today, anywhere else in the world, has as much political clout and political strength as the Communist Party of China. That's a reality. So when you talk about the Communist Party of China, I hope you will at least acknowledge the importance.
But you would also acknowledge about the Chinese Communist Party that they select themselves, they are not elected. And they place themselves, and they are not a democratic entity, and they are not there by the will of the Chinese people per se, by all of the will of the Chinese people, but it's an orchestrated mechanism that has placed them there with an autocratic vision and a prism. So are you priding yourself in your autocratic attitude and that there is no place for democracy in China? That is something the Chinese Communist Party has to then reflect and inflect upon. And are they really then the largest political party who have been chosen by the will of the people? Do you really enjoy the will of the people, Professor Victor Gao? That question. General KJ Singh also wanted to respond, so let me bring him in and then you can take him on, sir. Yes, General KJ Singh.
Anand, there is a recorded and proven, validated interference of China in choosing a regime in Nepal, in trying to influence the activities in Bhutan, in choosing the regime and fostering a regime in Myanmar, in interfering with the election process in Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, all around us. It's a proven, validated. It's not me, it's international press, and Chinese ambassador at one stage was called out in Nepal, what he was doing. So to that extent, for Chinese to say, or CCP to say that they have nothing to do with what Indians choose or what they do is a big canard. Frankly, they are trying to set a stage. They've been doing it from so many years, from Naxalbari, Naxalism, left-wing extremism, Maoist parties. They have taken that narrative for decades. But that apart, Anand, the thing is that we have to also give credit to the fact that PM Modi did not start with an attitude of taking on China blindly. He tried to resolve things. Even in Shangri-La dialogue, he distanced himself from the Quad initially. It's only when China pushed us in a corner that we have taken this stand. And now, indeed, China would be worried because India has expedited its infrastructure building. Beyond Galwan, what we did in Kailash, what we did in Yangtze, these two incidents prove the fact that Indians will not take it lying down. So, to that extent, Chinese would want an unstable regime. They would want some coalition kind of arrangement or something they would feel comfortable with. Anybody would. It's logical. To that extent, the current regime has taken a very categorical stand that they are going to develop infrastructure, they are going to work at a fast pace. So that much is there. And to say that China is wanting to settle it, it is a colonial legacy, that also is a big hoax. Because where they want to settle, they are settling, but they are settling on their own terms. They have this thing to tire you out. They like to build a kind of a narrative that it's a peace, it is tranquil, there is nothing wrong, let us push it on the back burner, we'll do it at an appropriate moment. But then appropriate moment is being now from 62. It's been, about 50 long years? You have to resolve these issues. And there is a real danger of clashes on LSE.
Yeah.
No two nuclear powered nations, after so much of tussle, are in this kind of a regime. And China has broken all the protocols. So Anand, I would tend to believe that China would definitely want a convenient regime, and China would also try to prolong this situation to their advantage.
So, Brahmachalani ji, if I were the CCP, I would want somebody who would give up all of the entire Aksai Chin region, saying not a blade of grass grows there. I would want somebody who would sign political agreements with me and say, all right, I'll look the other way. I would sign RCEPs, which makes me a trade-dependent nation totally kills my manufacturing. We have allowed, I would want somebody who allows so much of investment into our film industry, into our media industry, into our entertainment, software, OTT platforms, apps, so much embedding that every other handset in every other Indian's pocket has got a Chinese chip and a Chinese machinery. I would like it if I were CCP. But what have I done as an Indian citizen, as an Indian government, as an Indian polity? Do we always wake up a little too late? Do we try and bend too much? Did we not learn from 62 that we said, all right, we will still swing the swing? Did we still went ahead? Did we not learn from the Demchok and the breaking down of the Zorawar fort in that region? That we still went and signed as a nation entities of cooperation with the Chinese? When I say Chinese, the CCP, sir.
Well, you raise very valid questions. The fact is that China wants a weak India, not a strong India. The fact is that long before this border crisis erupted in the year 2020, because of Chinese encroachments on Indian territory, the CCP was working to contain India. Who built up Pakistan as a military counterweight to India through transfer of weapons of mass destruction, including nuclear weapons technology and missile technology? It was China. This is the only example in modern history, in fact, since the advent of the nuclear age, the only example of one country or one nuclear power aiding and abetting another country to become a nuclear weapons power. So we have a history of China working to weaken and contain India. And yet, and this is the tragedy, that we still have not woken up to meet the Chinese threat in earnest. Just look at the trade between India and China, how India is allowing China to increase its trade surplus year after year. Last year, the Chinese trade surplus with India went up by more than 50%. It cost more than $100 billion. We are allowing the Chinese to have their cake and eat it too. On one hand, they are engaged in border aggression. On the other hand, they are increasing their trade profits with India.
Yes.
It's time to realize that the Chinese Communist Party is an institution that is antithetical to global peace, an institution that seeks to undermine Indian security. And you can never have a deal with the CCP.
So what's the solution, Brahmachalani? I have limited time. One question to you and then Professor Victor Gao. The CCP will continue to do what they want to do. But how is it that we can stop them? Why is it that we are unable to stop themselves embedding into Indian society, corrupting the Indian mind space? Is it so difficult to beat them at their game?
Well, the day we recognize that there can be no peace with the CCP, because the CCP does not believe in peace. It believes in what it calls a smokeless war. It pursues this three warfares doctrine, which is an official doctrine in China. Now, in this smokeless war, they seek to undermine the security of every rival that they believe is the rival of China. And systematically, they pursue this smokeless war below the threshold of open conflict. That is, just short of open war, they use all means possible to undermine the security of India. This is exactly what we are seeing. For example, by stealth, without taking on the Indian army, they encroached on key borderlands in Ladakh, avoiding direct combat. And when clashes were happened, we saw how poorly they came out, how they have hid their casualty figure. They posthumously honored 4 soldiers, but still today they have not released the total fatality toll from the Galwan Valley clashes. They don't even honor their martyrs. This is the Chinese Communist Party.
Well, Professor Victor Gao, yes, we can keep saying, you would say one thing and we would have a different point of view. Let me just quickly ask you, because I know you've been very closely involved with the CCP and how they think. So let me ask you, does the CCP-led China see India as a friend, a foe, or as a nation or an entity of people that are dispensable?
Allow me to say the real truth. Allow me to say the real truth. China views India as an important neighboring country with Asian civilization, and China and India throughout the centuries have engaged each other on peaceful and equal terms. Therefore, China does not view India as an enemy or as an adversary. China does not view India as a competitor. China views India as a potential partner to deal with each other, to trade with each other, and to encourage people-to-people exchanges. Now, you may remember, you talked about democracy. Now, China believes in that democracy need to work. About 40 years ago, China's GDP and India's GDP were more or less on the par with each other. Today, China's GDP is almost 6 times as big as India's GDP. This means whatever system is in China, it works. It has worked over the past 4 decades. I hope India will get its act together and increase the size of the GDP to be on the par with China again in no time. If that happens, I will be very happy. Chinese people will be very happy, because we will have a larger economy. Trade is good. Trade should be encouraged. Don't be worried about trade and don't blame China for trade. China is the largest trading nation with more than 130 countries in the world. Not only India, many other countries. This is why China is so influential in the world, because China engages in trade with all these countries.
But trade at what cost? That's the big question, sir. That's the big question. China has identified America as an adversary, but does the CCP realize that India needs to be an able ally and a friend in this region if it's supposed to be an era of Asian dominance? Otherwise, constant flux like this, an issue like this border issue, is something that could have been resolved more than 7 decades ago, and it still stands undissolved because of the fact that perhaps the CCP viewed India as weak. Now only the strong negotiate with the strong. So India will also flex muscle, and India has shown its strength, its economic might too. Now it's two strong people sitting across the table. Can this be resolved? We'll have to wait and watch. And ahead of G20, will there be some big steps that will be taken? Even at the BRICS summit, we'll have to wait and watch. Thank you very much. I have to move on. Professor Victor Gao, thank you very, very much. General KJ Singh stays on. We see if Professor Brahmachalani can also stay on with us on this very important aspect. News just coming through, ladies and gentlemen. There are no takers for this K-brand extremism that's being pushed by our enemy across the border as a narrative. And there is increasing frustration that is being witnessed. And this is a story that we must bring to you, ladies and gentlemen, on the eve of our Independence Day, because the world over, people are standing for a united India, an India where everybody, every religion, caste, community, creed thrive, and which is also poised to become one of the top 3 economies in the world in the next 5 years. The frustration of this K-gang is out. Sikh groups are feeling that they are losing respect and love across the world due to this entire radical approach, and there is no active support. In fact, support is actually dying down. That's what we are given to understand. Now have a look at this. This is the information that we have. It's a mega CNN News 18 exclusive. Our group editor security, Manoj Gupta, getting us these details. Have a look at this. Sikh groups are concerned over the global respect and affection due to the radical approach, because majority of the Sikhs don't agree with this. And they are saying the acts of a few is demeaning the entire community. Sikh groups feel their legacy of hospitality, charity is being overshadowed. The story of Sikhi itself finds its roots in Sanatan Dharma, and that is a reality. There's no point taking that away. It's rooted with India and India's security. Families have sacrificed so many for the safety of Bharat. And that story, and that's the pride the Sikhs wear so much on their sleeve, generation after generation. K-gangs have no association with Guru Granth Sahib. In fact, those who stand there and say that we are doing it for Sikhi themselves are insulting Sikhi with the way their attire is and what they call themselves. They don't even follow the 5 principles of Sikhi. So these are all aspects that stand out. Sense of leadership void among Sikhs in UK, USA, Germany, France and Canada. Where are the right voices, the right-minded voices? Why are they being forced into silence? A lot of them have had enough of this bullying and they are not going to take it anymore. Sikhs abroad are facing harassment from aggressive activists for expressing criticism, but they are not going to wilt now. That's the sense we're getting. Many Sikh groups feel that this entire Khalistan issue has been blown out of proportion in India, whereas it's got no legs at all. On ground, there are no takers in India. You're making a lot of noise all over the world, but there are no takers for it in India. Lieutenant General KJ Singh is with us, and we also have Puneet Sahni joining us. Namaste and Jai Hind. Yeah, Puneet, I must say, I just love to see that turban. The tricolor as a turban for me, I'm a fan of that. You know, हमारे मेरे कोट में झंडा है, आपने तो सिर में, आपने तो पगड़ी में पग में झंडा लगाया. It's just amazing. But General KJ Singh is also looking at the flag on his coat sleeve. So fantastic. So har ghar mein tiranga, har dil mein tiranga. That's what we are working towards. But General KJ Singh, would you agree this frustration, is it evident? And also the countermeasures which have happened. India's diplomatic initiative has taken time, but we are seeing it manifest in Australia, in the UK, in Canada, in the US. Plus we've also done away with some of these pests.
See, Anand, you have flagged a very appropriate and important issue. Basically, it is because our Independence Day is coming, these people want to stay in some kind of news. See, what has happened in British Columbia is 2 or 3 thugs and lunatic kind of elements have gone there. They have put some posters, they vandalized a temple, and they've run away. They've not taken a stand or done anything which which is courageous. It's a cowardice. So this is the kind of activity which is to generate news, to remain relevant. Now in these societies there is a realization, there is an introspection happening. See, recently the British envoy came here, they discussed with us, they are setting up a fund to counter radicalism. That's a fallout of Colin Bloom report, where their own expert had flagged that this is very dangerous tendency. It needs to be curbed. Our diplomats have also had success. Australia has also instituted some measures. Canada is also coming around to at least making correct noises. But the problem is there is a huge big vote bank. I interact with some Canadians and I ask them, then how is it that that's happening? They say, see, we are not interested. But we are not the kind of elements who will get involved in this. We are doing our business, we are doing our trade, but it is time that our opinion makers encourage these people to take up a stand and to speak for this cause, that you can't allow these fringe elements to hijack the entire Canadian diaspora, which has made a good name for itself. But these people who are really fringe, they are doing some very nominal kind of activity over there, but they want to remain relevant. Now, and there is also a realization that there is absolutely no traction in India. After what happened to Amritpal, nobody stood up for him. Just no. They called him Bagoda and all those names were given. And when I speak to people here, they tell me, sir, they are just creating some noise with they say, Kap pare, you all give it too much of importance. That's how our people are looking at it. So I hope the Canadian government, the law enforcement agencies come down heavily on these people and send a message across Anand.
Would you agree? Would you agree, Puneet, that one of the biggest problems is that it started in India when politics entered the SGPC? The same way that it is politics that is actually dictating all of this entire patronizing such lumpen elements, and it's a handful of them who come there and who create so much of ruckus. But how do you deal with such elements? What should be done?
See, SGPC...
Sir, General Singh, Puneet, and then I'll come back to you, sir.
See, I agree with some of your points, and actually I disagree with you. So when you talk about these lumpen elements and that these people don't have support, you are right. But the thing is, these people are at it for 30 years. In Canada, they never stopped. In India, this nuisance was not there. And I disagree with sir. He is saying, it is not. Actually, this has come in India. Like, I am from Delhi, where the Sikh pogrom happened in '84. And we never saw a picture of Bhindranwale, where we suffered. There was nothing. Now it's everywhere after this Khalistan Andolan. So you can say it's fringe, but it's actually growing. And, with all due respect to you and also your guest, I am a student of economics. You are going on procedures. India is doing to Australia. I am a student of economics. I believe in outcomes. And if you are an honest person and if you are a fair analyzer, and we have to do this for our country, then you have to concede this nuisance did not exist at Mr. Manmohan Singh's premiership. And I don't doubt the intentions of Prime Minister Modi. I'm sure his intentions are very pure. But he has taken a lot of steps which he thought, he actually made the mistake that the Khalistanis are some representative of the Sikhs. And he went and appeased them. And if you see all this nuisance that we are actually in this show and debating now, it's only now. You were also living, 10 years ago, and I also was living. Did you even hear that something is like this? So they have done, we have to put... I am not saying that we have done Dimash, we have done this, and we have done... Oh, bhai, outcome kya hai? What is the outcome? Outcome is what steps they have taken. The country's national interest has been harmed. And again, this is not the topic of your discussion. I take a strong exception to what Mr. Modi has said in the parliament about Blue Star as well. And they don't understand what will be the two steps. You see what Akalis are saying now. This Bhindranwala desecrated the Golden Temple. Rather than that, you play politics with national security. It's very wrong. And this is what they have been doing for the last 9 years, maybe out of pure intentions. I concede that they are not some traitors or they don't have any animus against the Sikhs. And brother, I want to just tell you, when we talk about that they don't have support, you have to put it in context. I tell you, Bhindanwala, when he was himself there, his right-hand man, you can imagine, he was in a way running the election. Do you know, he actually lost the Gurdwara election by one of the greatest Punjabi. His name was Jathedar Jeevan Singh Umranagar. From Beas, he lost the election. So, and I have given actually very careful sociological data. Even at the time in 1980s and 90s, these thugs has no traction amongst the Punjabi community. And I have the data if you want, if you give me. But even at that time, what were the consequences?
Correct.
25,000 people were killed in this, in a decade. So when you say they don't have support, that doesn't mean that they cannot cause, catastrophe and destruction. We have to put that in. I'm never saying that they have support.
Make a fair point,
I can give you data. Right. So that is my point.
No, you make a fair point, and you're also saying that somewhere the leeway that was given that to try and say that, listen, I'll come and embrace you, I'll try and come bring you back into the fold. That didn't change the way they thought, and perhaps that emboldened them to think that they can give manifestation, perhaps to what their machinations were, at a time when it looked like you're appeasing them. But that's true, but you have to go there with the thought process that the larger number, say about 300 plus who are taken off that list, all 300 are not the ones who have turned around. There is 20, 30 odd who have turned around and spoilt it all. But General KJ Singh, Puneet, before I come back to you for a comment, let General KJ Singh also weigh in on this and then I'll come back. General KJ Singh, where do you stand? So for the sake of those two, so should we look at the 250, 270 odd who have reformed, or should we worry about the 25, 30 odd who have come here and stoked so much of trouble across the board?
See, one basic problem is the politics of Punjab. This SGPC element and Akali Dal. Now what happens is, moment the party is out of power, they start behaving very irresponsibly. Akali Dal was in power, it was in coalition with ruling party, everything was okay. Now, moment they are out of power, they have to somehow find relevance. And it also sprouts certain competitive factions which want to take even more extremist line, because how you find relevance in society is that you appear to be more radical than the other. So you have this Taksali and few other factions which come up. So all in all, it's not as if we can't have a proper dialogue, or we can't because I interact with large number of people here, and while I respect the sentiments of Mr. Sani and I feel equally concerned, and I feel that we should involve people like him to bring better results in our dialogue. But the fact of the matter is also that largely people here they do not approve of what has happened earlier. Like in villages and all, people call it santap. Santap, suffering and misery. So they're not for it. They want, and Punjab has today more relevant problems, dealing with drugs, waterlogging, rotation. All these are very relevant problems.
No, but
and in this we are getting caught in this unnecessary, and because there is a K2 cell in ISI which has to show results, so they keep feeding these elements and they have to periodically bring it up.
we see,
But we have to remain focused.
See, political ideologies are on one side. One can always continue to fight on political ideologies as far as elections, but we are all Indian citizens. Most important story in Punjab today is that there is a future in Punjab and not in Canada or UK. That has to percolate down right at the grassroots, because the villages are getting empty. People are queuing up at airports. The crowd that I see at the Delhi airport for the people who are wanting to leave this country for good and get away to places like Australia, places like UK, places like Canada, or even the US, or wherever possible, that is a sad state of affairs. And that means you're disillusioned with your own country. And if you're disillusioned with your own country, you're like driftwood. Anybody and everybody can then corrupt your mindset and say this is what you need to do. And they will use this entire disgruntled element to turn it around into a narrative that then becomes an anti-India sentiment on foreign soil. Puneet, final word.
Yeah, so see brother, when you said citizen, it is a very important word. We just use it like, Citizen means like my loyalty is to you and your loyalty is to me, then your tribe, right? Now, what BJP doesn't understand, and I hope like I am able to explain this, SGPC is basically running on Muslim League and it comes from the same time, and they have like do Qaumi Nazariya, separate nationhood. What they call Muslim League called Juda Gana Qawmiyat, they say Vakri Qawm, whereas Gurus have never used the word Qawm. So you see, Mahatma Gandhi went out of his way to Muslim League, and they always, insulted him and repudiated him and made a joke out of him. And see, his intentions were also pure and very saintly, and what damage he has caused to the nation. So you look at what SGPC is doing. They can have namaz, people do namaz to do in the Gurdwara. They can behave well with the Congress. But the BJP or the Hindu element or the RSS, when they go to embrace them, you are a brother, they spit on your face. Because the thing is, their entire ideology and reason of existence is do Qaumi Nazariya. So if you say you are my brother and we are one, they say, oh, you are attacking our very foundation. They don't want to be your brother. And you please stop being your brother because you don't understand the damage you are causing to the, the brother. And the last point I would make is, I have the highest respect for the army. There is, sir served in the army and I salute to him. You see, when he goes to fight on the border, and I'm just making a fair point. Please don't take it personally. You are known, your family would be well taken care of and safe. In Punjab, when the Punjab police under, KPS Gill went to fight, do you know what happened? They knew that their family would be slaughtered. For example, this guy Sukhdev Babar of Babar Khalsa, the day he was killed by the police in 92, 37 policemen and 63 of their family members were killed. This was the price we paid to bring back peace in Punjab. And, and this is not for Mr. Modi or even 10 times Mr. Modi or anybody, to gamble with or something. This is something so sacred and something this is so priceless that nobody should play with the peace of Punjab. And when you do this with the SGPC and the Khalistanis, you're basically undermining the peace and brotherhood of Punjab. That is my point. And I'm sorry if it offended somebody, but my duty as a Sikh and somebody who's believe in Bharat Mata is to speak the truth, even if it hurts.
No, the truth has to be the truth has to be heard, it has to be accepted, and the truth has to be applied in trying to ensure that there is no repeat of what happened as far as which is being marked today as the Vibhajan Vibhishika Day. We don't want another element which is going to try and break away, and that was again a handful of people who were so fundamentalist and radical, and it's a bunch of radicals on the other side. That nation is a failed state 75 years down the line, but it happened at the cost of this nation being torn, not into one but now into 3 different nations. That's what had happened. That's what happened. We'll talk about that when we come back after a break. But for the moment, Puneet Sahni and Lieutenant General KJ Singh, thank you very much. When we come back, it's Professor Gurmurthy and also General Shekhatkar who take the right stand. They're joining us to share their thoughts on partition. Could partition have been avoided? When were the seeds sown, and are we staring at another possibility like this ever in the near future? Stay with us.
More heinous, minimum 20 years life term for gang rape or death. Even many things are there which we can discuss. And the most important point is that in IPC there were 511 sections. Now it is 355 sections because many crimes were not. Just one second.
Yes.
I'm only coming on very important point.
Yeah.
Like terrorism, it was not fully well defined. Now in this act you will find what is terrorism, what is treason, what is the difference between Rajdrah and Deshdrah. You cannot do Deshdrah. You can oppose government, not the country.
No, you're
what
right.
What is wrong
you're
with
right.
that?
You're right.
And only last line, which he said, it is prejudicial to the existing system. Existing system has not delivered justice in this country, sir. The justice is available for the rich people, not for the common man. So there should be a timeline. There should be a fixed timeline so that the courts will have to work and deliver justice.
No, Rajivji, I think I will pick on the last part of what you just said, that justice has been a luxury of the privileged in this country. You're right about that. And the colonial baggage cannot be shed till every person, irrespective of their caste or financial status, has equal access to justice and institutions of justice in our country. The argument that Mr. Lekhi was making is that the manner in which these reforms have been presented makes one seem like everything is going to be okay if these 3 bills are passed. The reality of the matter is, if there are no judicial reforms in this country, if the number of judges at the local level are not increased, if the police reforms are not implemented in this country, no real change will really come in. I want to bring in Ashpreet also on that point. Ashpreet, barring the politics of it, and you're a lawyer yourself, what are the substantial points on which you disagree with the 3 proposed bills that have been tabled in Parliament?
Thank you very much. Kindly allow me a minute and a half uninterrupted. As far as this entire exercise is concerned, the entire criminal law overhaul, the Bharatiya Janata Party is simply doing it in order to leave an imprint on our social, cultural, legal and political aspects of the country. That is what their objective is, because the objective behind it is a handful of changes which could have been taken care of by a handful of amendments. Just a handful of amendments would have sufficed. They did not have to entirely change the whole thing, beget a complete criminal overhaul of the criminal justice system, because I'll tell you why. I'll give you an example. If we were to renovate a room in our house, we'll renovate the room. We will not bring down the entire house and start building it from scratch. That is what the Bharatiya Janata Party's government has been doing, simply in order to leave an imprint. And what happens due to this is, we waste our time, we waste our energy, we waste our resources, we waste our money and many more things. And due to this, there would be complexities, there would be disruptions. There are so many trials that are happening, tens of thousands. It would beget so much complexity for those trials to be decided upon, and there would be implications to it. So the Bharatiya Janata Party is accustomed, to not consulting with the stakeholders like they did at the time of farm laws, and then they had to, after wasting a year, they had to take it back.
But
I think history repeats here. Number three, a very important point. You see, the Bharatiya Janata Party in the last 70 years did not ever raise this issue. They have been in the government from the last 9 years, and if they say this was also wrong, also bad, then why have they been a party to it by not doing anything in the last 9 long years? They have no answers to it. Last but not the least, I just have one thing to say to the Bharatiya Janata Party, that if you really were all about reform, then there would have been a definition of hate speech. There is no definition at all. There are many cases that are being registered. Nothing about it. Number 2, there would have been a comprehensive law with regards to custodial tortures that have been happening. Number 3, the Honorable Supreme Court has categorically opined against sedition law, and the Bharatiya Janata Party is undermining the Supreme Court, something that they have always done, by strengthening the sedition law that we have in the country.
Well, my views on sedition are well known. I mean, I'm in the minority of people who actually is in favor of retaining this particular law, particularly in this circumstance. But what I want to bring into focus is the duplicity of the government here. Now, the government has been in the forefront defending sedition and said that, okay, as far as this particular aspect is concerned, necessary. And they're undisputed that a certain aspects of which are actually necessary. But I'll be in one with the government where that's concerned. But now the government is on defensive and is trying to use this so-called deletion of sedition to justify these 3 laws. Now, I call it duplicitous, because it is not as if that particular provision has been removed altogether and is non-existent.
Okay.
Or that the option the government to deal with seditious activity is no longer there.
Right.
It is there, yes, but in an incarnation it is different. And that incarnation may actually make this particular offence slightly more amorphous than 124A, which had tailored into it.
Today is the Partition Horrors Remembrance Day, an annual national day of remembrance observed on the 14th of August in order to never forget those who suffered, who were brutalized, who were victimized during that migration, perhaps the biggest ever migration on planet Earth, 55 million human beings displaced. It may be celebrated in another nation as its Independence Day, but at what cost? That's the big question. Let's go across to our guest this evening, Lieutenant General D.B. Shekhatkar, defense expert and Chancellor, Sikkim Central University, and also S. Gurumurthy ji, editor, Tughlaq. Namaste and Jai Hind, gentlemen. Always a pleasure to speak with you. Professor Gurumurthy, if I may start with you. Would Bharat have been undivided? Could Bharat have been undivided? Or was it an inevitability?
This was not an inevitability. This inevitability was created in two stages. Last time I mentioned to you that in 1937 only, the Muslim consciousness was officialized through the All India Shariat Act, passed with collaboration with the British government by Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Till then, there was an interlacing between Hindu and Muslim communities. They had common civil law covering most of the economic issues. Of course, in marriages and all that, they had their own law. And even among Hindus, there were separate marriage customs and all that. It is the country of diversity which accepted Islamic customs also. But the social interlacing which was there for thousands of years was psychologically cut on the day the Shariat Act was passed. Within 3 years, Jinnah demanded Pakistan, which would have been impossible had the Shariat Act not been passed and the separate Muslim consciousness was not created. That's the first point. The second point is why August 14th? Most people do not understand that Congress and Muslim League had jointly formed the Committee to Frame Constitution for United India. It was on 14th August 1946. Direct action was called by Jinnah because by negotiations, by discussions, by argument, by logic, Pakistan could not be created. And thousands were slaughtered. And you go into the Bangladesh website, which says that the Muslim League had prepared for this months in advance. They had drawn their ration. They had stored petrol. They had drawn all that the government could give for 1 month, 1.5 months, so that they can carry on rioting for so long. And they caught the entire Hindu population of Calcutta unawares. And thousands were slaughtered on 14th August 1946. Then the British was partly, not exactly promoting, but they knew this was inevitable and they could have prevented. They didn't want to prevent. And Muslim League knew that this one final message by violence and bloodshed was the only way to ensure partition. That happened on 14th August 1946. So partition did not happen on 14th August 1947. It happened on 14th August 1946. The reason Pakistan was created on 14th August 1947. Because they wanted to say that we got Pakistan by fighting. Ladke liye Pakistan. You know, this is a psychology which was created. I wouldn't put this blame on the ordinary Muslim.
Right.
He is as foolish or as intelligent as the Hindus. It is this conspiratorial, separatist, anti-other religious mindset of Islamic theology, which was allowed into full play in politics. That is 14th August 1947.
So that's the political aspect of it. But General Shekhardkar, do you believe partition could have been avoided had we had the military will?
A very excellent, very fine question. I am firm believer partition could have been prevented, stopped, and it should have been prevented. Straight answer. Unfortunately, what happened, where the problem started, some people in India at that time, when we were getting independence, I was a young boy studying in primary school. There was no national flag, there was nothing of the sort. But we were watching certain things happening inside the villages, inside the township. Some people felt that since the Britishers, when they came to India, when they invaded India in some form, their ancestors of a particular community, the Mughals or anybody else, were ruling India, and therefore they should have handed over India to these people or their descendant. This is where the problem started, and that time those who were so-called leaders of a particular community, which has now formed a nation and which has become a problematic nation for themselves and for others. That is where the problem started. I am firm believer it must have been stopped. It should have been stopped. But those who were stopping this were not in majority, and those who were in favor of it, among our own people, there were certain people who were in favor of partition. This is what the history says. And in my life, whatever I have seen of last about 60, 70 years, this is my view. Now we are paying for it. Not only we are paying for it, even our neighbors who got divided, who got partitioned,
Yes.
they are paying very dearly. And they are now creating problem for us. This is in brief my perception on this issue.
But Professor Gurumurthy, there were those who allowed this to happen, as General Shekatkar is mentioning. There were those who then asked, who said, "Hota hai to hone do." Everybody blames Jinnah, but weren't there others? If the partition of Bengal could have been opposed and then it could have been overturned, why is it that the partition of Bharat wasn't opposed?
When the partition of Bengal took place, there was no Muslim League. The Muslims were as unorganized as the Hindus. It is the reversing of the partition of Bengal which resulted in the formation of the Muslim League. And even then it was not a success in Bengal because the Hindus and Muslims had such interlacing. Whether it is language, whether it is literature, whether it is dress, whether it is even the bindi. So the Muslim had to shift to Lucknow to create Pakistan. The Hindu leadership reflected the Hindu society. It was as unorganized as the Hindu society. Pakistan was able, the Muslim League was able to theologically create a very powerful anti-Hindu feeling. Pakistan was born out of hatred for Hindus, not love for Muslims.
But the history itself documents, General Shekatkar, that those who voted for Pakistan, that means voted for the Muslim League, are spread around today's Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, all across India. Why is it that those led by Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan and that entire region of Balochistan, then you had POJK, other than Sindh which voted for Muslim League, the rest did not. So why was this partition allowed? On the one hand Bengal, on the other hand Punjab. Sikhs were robbed of their own worship places. Kartarpur Sahib, Nankana Sahib all went to the other side. Sikhs were left here.
You are absolutely right. As I said initially earlier, there were people within our own side, our own nation that time, who had that tendency and the mindset, Jane do, they were in a hurry. You are absolutely correct. Pakistan occupied Kashmir. We are equally responsible for that. And not only our ancestors are responsible, even today we are responsible that we don't have the willpower to undo what has been done. The people there want to get out of Pakistan's control. But then you require somebody else to help them. Secondly, within own Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, other people in our own country also, those who were the so-called top leaders of India, some of them had the viewpoint that we do not want these people in our own country. Let them go. I do not know why. And then by allowing that, let them go, see the problem we have landed up now.
Yeah.
See the problem we have been gone through.
Right.
We have fought wars. We are fighting continuous war in terrorism form. We have to create a new nation in our neighborhood. And now the country which has been created has now under the remote control of somebody else who was equally enemy to India.
Yes.
Look
I
at
know what you're saying.
the problem we have been facing, and we'll continue to face this. We'll continue to face this. Of course, India is not the India which was at the time of partition. We are not the India of 20 years back. Today we are a different India.
Right.
But this different India will have to wash the sins of those who created this part for us. That is our problem.
Yeah.
And that is the problem we are handing over to our coming generation after generation after generation.
Well, General Shekhardkar and Professor Gurumurthy, thank you very, very much for your time. A longer conversation on this aspect on Independence Day as a very special effort. But for the moment, winding up this edition of The Right Stand. Brass Tacks with Zaka right now.
Good evening, this is Brass Tacks. I'm Zaka Jacob. The situation on the line of actual control between India and China has not gone back to the pre-2020 position. Yes, in many of the friction points, disengagement has happened, but not at two very critical areas. One is the Dipsang Plains, the other Dimchok. And through the course of this program, we will try and explain to you why those 2 points are important. But more importantly, today, the 19th round of talks between the core commanders of India and China happened at the line of actual control. So far, there's been no resolution. Clearly, this went on from 9:30 in the morning till about 5:30, so about 8 hours of talks. And we're expecting a statement from the Ministry of External Affairs and from the Northern Command of the Indian Army, along with a statement from the Chinese Foreign Ministry sometime tomorrow to understand if any breakthrough has happened in this current round, the 19th round of talks between the Indian and Chinese core commanders. But one thing we have to understand is that there are two big summits